What is a 21st century learner? The 21st century learner is someone who wears many hats, and each of those hats tend to be quite different than those of the previous generations of learners. A 21st century learner has a desire to learn in a variety of mentally and potentially physically stimulating methods. They are more interested in the style of the instruction itself than in the content of the education. I find that my students will quite thoroughly master material that is not relevant to the objectives if the lesson was interesting and fun. At the same time, they struggle to remember much of the important material when it is presented in the more mundane methods of the 20th century. It has reached a point for educators that we are more salesmen and women than we are a purveyor of knowledge. We have to sell them on the value of what we are teaching and do everything in our power to get the students to buy in. We can make the material as easy or as difficult as we would like, but if we don't get the students to buy it, they won't learn a thing. Today's learners are much more socially based with their activities than previous generations. This socialism can be in the real or digital worlds. If we as educators tap in and utilize this desire for social interaction within the learning framework successfully, the 21st century learners remain focused on the lessons and one of the greatest strengths and weaknesses of the 21st century learner is their extremely short attention span. They often appear to be a generation of learners with attention deficit disorder of varying magnitudes. They are being raised on commercials, sound bites, and 3-minute YouTube videos which continue to exacerbate these traits. The weaknesses of these traits are often obvious, such as the inability to stay focused on long-term projects, assignments, and objectives. They can be very easily distracted by their environments to the point where isolation seems to be the only way to encourage long-term focus on any one thing, which of course lowers their buy-in to the lessons when they are more socially isolated. Strengths of short-term attention span can include the ability to switch tasks very effectively. If the tasks or objectives are short in the time requirements, they can easily achieve these smaller steps of the overall objective and quickly transition to the next phase of the assignment. As an educator, it is important to accept this trait of the 21st century learner and incorporate it into the educational environment, chunking material together and breaking down large objectives into their smaller components to allow for better digestion of the material by the learner. 21st centuries, while sometimes called selfish, perhaps incorrectly, also have a great deal of pride, even if that pride hasn't been deservedly earned. Their egos can be both a positive and a negative. The negative side often manifests with a sense of defiance when the students don't see the value in the educational objectives and a sense of entitlement. They feel that a job done, not necessarily done well, is good enough. They are quite satisfied with simply completing a task and can be quite frustrated when they don't earn top scores for simple completion of an objective, even if they have shown no level of excellence with the assignment. This positive side is that they will often rise to a challenge. 21st century learners will often step up to a challenge simply for the sake of the challenge itself. I have found that if I make an objective more difficult to be achieved by today's learners, the students will thrive on that challenge and perform better than expected, and when the objectives are watered down and too easy, they will get bored and perform much lower than expected. The 21st century learner can be quite difficult for educators that haven't grown up with a 21st century style of education. We often think that it's entirely the kids' fault when the educational objectives are not met, when it is actually a blending of both. Students must buy into their education and do their part, and teachers have to do their job differently than they would choose if they want to achieve better results with their students. This may not be fair, but then again, whoever said life was fair?